What's up, guys? I'm back with another video, and it's been a little bit, but I wanted to continue observing the information metabolism elements in practice. Reason for this is because in personality theory, a lot of times you struggle to actually see the theory in practice, and it's just good to give practical examples for people to track in real time. So I thought about doing this. So what I'll do today is extroverted thinking, extroverted logic, how to observe that element in practice in people, obviously. Again, little disclaimer, I have given this no prior thought, so this is kind of stream of consciousness and what I can muster after a long day of work and being pretty tired. So one thing that you can notice about TE types in practice is they have they're well read, they're knowledgeable on many different topics, and one thing that you'll notice with them is they have a keen ability to accumulate factual information pretty rapidly and continuously. The base function is always on. That's one thing to keep in mind. So this type is always kind of acquiring new methods or relevant information on how to do their job better, how to basically perform anything more efficiently. It doesn't, and effectively. It doesn't matter whether it's in the domain of relationships. It doesn't really matter if it's in the domain of business. Now, obviously, a TE base is weak in ethics, so they may not have the most experience in ethics, in relationships, and how to know who you like and what kinds of people to avoid and all that kind of stuff. But the point is, if there's some lack of information on their part, they know how to get that information. They will do research, they will understand how something works and size it up pretty quickly, and then they're trying to implement what they know. Whether it's a long-term application of what they know, which would be more of the gamma NT version of extroverted logic, or the gamma version of extroverted logic, or how to practically manipulate their physical environment, things that they're working on, how to improve processes at work and make things more streamlined and efficient. Regardless, both of those methods require factual, relevant information, data. And this is a constant process. I just said this previously, but they're always acquiring new factual information. It's usually indicative of lower TE types that have limited information on things, of which they just kind of recycle through and think over and think on it, which basically really confirms what they already hold to, right? Because if you don't have a bunch of new inputs, then the whole circuit is just going to kind of go around and around and around and never really produce anything new. No new thoughts, no new ideas, no new perspectives. It's just kind of a feedback loop. That's anathema to a TE type, a high TE type. They're always trying to acquire new information, factual, relevant information. And they can do this in many different ways. There isn't one method that you can expect a TE type to use, because that's not in the nature of TE to only have one method, right? it just follows that if you're trying to brother, can you either go, bro? People can't. If you're trying to be the most effective at something, which requires relevant information, then you can't just have one method of doing things, because it's possible that there's an unexplored method that you haven't tried, and it could be the best method. It could be the best solution to the problem that you're faced with. And so that makes TE types very adaptable to methods, changing methods, improving methods, learning about new methods to solve some problem that they have. And they can rapidly jump in between procedures and ways of doing things, because TE is not structured the same way that TI is. TE is looking for relevant solutions to real problems that they have. And if I only use some kind of static code in order to solve this problem, then I might have a very niche situation that the code doesn't account for, or some procedure doesn't account for. And so they have a rapid mind that's scanning their environment or what's in front of them, whether it's even conceptually some intellectual problem or some physical problem, in order to find the solution. And that's satisfying in and of itself. So you can find them doing a bunch of research, reading a bunch of books. You can find them having intentional intellectual conversations with people. This is more of the NT variant of TE. Obviously, LSEs, for example, they can be well-read and knowledgeable. That's very possible, and sometimes is oftentimes true of LSEs. But their pool of data that they're digesting is practical information, right? Things that actually have some effect on their real life, whether it's to improve some system that they're working on at work or at home to make things more efficient and smooth operationally, or it can be more related to becoming a better person, right? Their the super id, which is their weak but valued elements. I think it's a super id. But so that's what you can expect with TE types, is a constant awareness of problems and their desire to solve those problems through research, through knowledge, right? That's really what it is. It's, here's an issue, I need resources in order to solve the problem, so I have to investigate and find the actual resources, whatever they may be. And they will do that. You don't have to ask them to do that, they just do it instinctively. What's another? There's a kind of stubbornness when it comes to thinking, a kind of resistance to thinking the way everybody else does about a certain topic. They're very independent-minded in regards to the things that they believe or they think, or their justifications for the things that they think or believe. They're critical towards source material. Where are you getting your information from? And if something sounds illegitimate intellectually, they will they demand evidence. They demand the facts to speak for the position. They don't care about some figurehead who claims to have this golden message that will alleviate the world of suffering. They want to see demonstrable evidence that what this person or this system of thought represents actually is factually accurate. It has some basis to it factually, where I can independently either falsify or verify through research, through testing. And so they're not people who are how do you say it? Just going to just take someone's word for it, right? They're not just going to do that. The facts speak for themselves, regardless of who is speaking them. And that's their source of authority. It's not a person. It's not, again, some ideologue that has some profound insights into reality. They don't really trust people like that, usually. LIEs would be more accepting of figures like that to an extent, just because they have higher intuition and understand. I've seen this theme also with LIEs, like an attraction to archetypes and trying to prove archetypes through evolutionary biology, for example, with Jordan Peterson. I even think Peter Thiel is probably a LIE, and he has some recent material on the Antichrist, which is very fascinating, but he gets very I just said the word archetypal in it, which is definitely the intuition. LSCs would be like, what are you talking about? Like, just imagine Richard Dawkins sitting through one of those lectures like, what is going on here? Like, let's just talk about the cell, bro. Let's just talk about mate selection. So those are some prominent behaviors. What is another behavior of TE? Again, I'm kind of just going off the dome here. I will say this. Some people have this idea that TE types it comes from MBTI, that they're uber structured and they are trying to make sure everything is in order, and they're going to browbeat you into submission until you do what they say, which is just completely false. TE types are not like that, because again, it's contrary to the definition of TE. If you're trying to solve, I already said that, but if you're trying to solve a problem, and there are many ways to skin a cat, and certain problems are niche, right? You could have one problem that requires one method and another problem that won't work with the same method. And so it demands adaptability in regards to methods and procedures. So they're not going to, they have some leniency if the output is desirable. So if you do something in a certain way that might be contrary to the way they might do something, it seems weird to me to think that a TE base would be like, well, no, you shouldn't actually do it that way. It's like, if they're output focused and they're independent minded, so they value the individual over the collective, then they probably don't give a crap which way you do something, as long as the output is productive. So in that sense, they can be kind of yielding towards methods. Maybe that's wrong. Maybe I'm getting that wrong, but it just seems like it makes sense to me that would be the case. So I guess the more nuanced conversation is, in what way does the inertness play out in TE leads? And one way I alluded to that and said that, which is, being skeptical of people's evidence for things, and being just skeptical generally. Like, they need to actually observe reality on their own in order for them to feel like they have confidence in a foundation, epistemologically. Like, they're not Kantian, they're not foundationalists. They don't really adopt like first principles, that form of philosophy. They're very naturalistic and evidentiary, and I need to actually go compare these two finches or these two birds and see the difference in their beaks. And why are their beaks different? Because they eat certain foods that are different, and they live in certain climates that are different. So they're not deductive. They're rather inductive. And if you want to say conceptually, what's the word? What's an analogy for TE? What's an analogy for TE would be something like the scientific method. It's inductive. It's forming a hypothesis based upon observations, firstly, and then concluding something after the fact. It's anathema to have a hypothesis or a belief without evidence. It's anathema to just, from the outset, presuppose things about reality and never test those presuppositions. That doesn't, for a TE type, is not. That's not attractive at all. That's more of a TI thing. And what's another? I'm trying to think. There is I'm trying to think. What else? I don't know why it's hard to come up with different. So they're well read or knowledgeable about things. I mean, one, the desire to keep others informed as well. I mean, TE is a thinking element. It's about understanding with the mind information and making decisions based on that information. And because it's in their ego block, it's something that they're strong at and they value, and they try to correct certain mistakes that other people might have, or misconceptions about that information that people might have, which is true of the ego block, the function of the ego block. That the ego block is basically the problems and solutions block. Society has this problem, and I know how to solve it. And so there is a pushing effect that's created from that, and the pushing is pushing that information in its proper context, knowing when to use it, how much to use. So if a TE lead is in an environment that is trying to understand how to operate your forklift, or how to make decisions based upon your like logistical decisions. We have this many orders to fulfill. These are the due dates for these orders. How are we going to actually accomplish this so that we fulfill them and the customer receives them on time, for example, right? Or where are our sales lacking and what relevant information would make us more money, right? Whatever. Like, how do we increase sales? Well, we can do it through marketing, or we can do it through a better product or more products, or focusing on the product that makes the most money. All of those things are kind of TE related, and so the TE type assumes they have the solution, and so they're going to tell you the solution. They're going to actually engage with that information in the public sphere, correcting people, bringing clarity to that information. What are the facts? Will this actually work the way we think it's going to work? So on and so forth. And from that standpoint, you could say that they can be pushy in that regard, but that has nothing to do with structure necessarily. It has everything to do with methods of actions and whether those actions are profitable or valuable or not. This is another thing. This actually is another thing. TE types really understand almost everything based upon whether people or business ventures or performance based on value or the lack thereof. That dichotomy is a very real thing. Useful or useless, valuable or not valuable. And they look at things based upon what the objects yield and how much investment is required to produce that yield. And so even when it comes to people, now this is more typified in a LIE because they have more serious judgments about people and their character, more so than an LSE. But if you're a person in their sphere that doesn't produce anything, whether that production is relational and it looks like you don't embetter them, or you don't challenge them, or you don't help them grow in any capacity, then you're a useless thing. And that sounds probably a little extreme, but the idea, I think, is fair, that they're always making evaluations of the usefulness of objects or the lack thereof. And I don't see why that wouldn't actually, especially, that's a very mechanical way to think about people, and a very depersonalized way to think about people, which would follow considering they have one-dimensional introverted ethics. And so I think that could be a real aspect of a TE lead. And for an LSE, it would probably look like being a little bit more critical about people's potential, right? You're like, they have usefulness or productivity, which is TE, and then they have skill acquisition and potential with any. And so if you combine those two together minus a weak FI, that looks like this person is not only useless, but they don't have any potential of becoming useful. Which is like kind of harsh, but it's also kind of funny. It's like, dang, dude, not only do you suck at this thing, but there's no hope for you. Like, you can't, I don't see anything that could potentially turn out for the good here. And I've tried many different ways of getting to you, different ways of communicating, different ways of different information to give you, and it seems like it's not working. So, yeah, this is probably all I'll say. It's a little bit longer, and I kind of diverted into different avenues, but yeah, just a little flavor of some things that you can track when you are trying to see TE in practice in people. So, peace.